Welcome, you miserable ingrates. Welcome to the You Deserve Better podcast. I am your host, The Other Son. Hearing other people's stories has been such an important part of my recovery from childhood trauma. The details are different, but the patterns are always there, and other survivors recognize them. It cannot be taught, only experienced. Finding that connection with other estranged adult children has been the one thing that has really made me feel less alone. It's made me feel understood for the first time. That validation that we're not the crazy ones. Today, to share their survivor story with us, we are joined by Tina. Tina, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started with some details. First, what is your gender identity, please?
Female.
All right, now for some family background. Bad parents is why we're here after all. Who was the toxic parent for you?
Both to some extent. One greater than the other.
And who was the one who was more toxic?
My mother.
Was your father more of an enabler or?
Yes, big time. And this is all relatively new for me, but it has been such a life-changing event. And it's still, every time we have an interaction, something new burbles out. And I always worshipped my father. He was my hero. He involved me in so many different things. He raised me very gender neutrally. So I learned how to have all these weird niche skills that I still use that kind of gave me that affirmation. So for me, some things are more positive than negative with him. And with my mother, we had absolutely chaos relationship until I became a mother. And, you know, I've said it before, even when she and I still had contact, was we had no relationship until I became a mother myself. And I had a very traumatic delivery, and she was immediately there. And within a few weeks, she had apologized, and I desperately needed help because I was critically ill and in the ICU and with a critically ill newborn, premature baby. And things from there were pretty perfect until 3 years ago.
Right. Are both your parents still alive?
Yep.
Are they still married?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Do you have any brothers or sisters? Any siblings?
I have one brother who was raised by completely different parents because he's about 7 years younger than me.
So is he a half brother? How is it he was raised by different? You mean your parents acting differently?
Oh, 150% different.
Okay, I see. Is it like a golden child type of thing, would you say? Is he the golden child?
Is. He was an adolescent felon. He made nothing of his life and lived at home until 18 months ago. And he is the golden boy. Literally can do no wrong. They still have great contact with him. All is well. Oh my gosh, the sun rises and sets.
Has it always been that? So, do you recall how things were before your brother was born? Like, do you feel like, I know it's going back pretty far, but like, do you recall any kind of a shift when that happened?
I don't have any conscious memory before the age of about, I would say, right after his birth. I honestly don't. And I've really tried to think a lot about it because I'm doing a lot of inner child stuff, and I'm trying to remember those specific things. I can remember smells. I have a lot of weird, auditory memory, tactile memory, things like that. But a lot of the bad things that happened to me before my brother was born. So I know that I'm blocking it out, and I don't know when that's going to change, but I don't notice a shift at all. I only know from what people tell me of what my childhood was like. I honestly have no conscious memory.
That's great
that.
that you've done. You sound so proactive about this that you're looking into this and doing the work, and that's just so encouraging to me. And it seems like that's a big benefit of when you have this realization is then you can start to do the work. The things that were hurting me my whole life, the things that I was upset about, I just thought it was a unique suffering to me, and nobody could understand this. And now, since realizing about my trauma, I've come to understand that many of these things actually have proper names, and other people suffer them. And now that I'm aware of that, now I can do the work. Before, I was just walking around oblivious. I had no idea about things like emotional dysregulation or imposter syndrome or
Mhm.
these type of things. Now that
Mhm.
I know about them, I can focus on them and I really can start doing work. It's like before this, my wheels were just sort of spinning, in
Mhm.
snow. And now I feel like finally I can get some traction and start moving toward a better life. Are
That's a
you
good euphemism. Yeah.
right? Are you married? Do you have kids of your own? Your
I
situation?
do. And the reason I have been so proactive is I have three really good reasons here at home, and
Oh,
they are budding young adults. I have two teenagers and I have a tween, I guess you'd call it. The
well,
love
I
of my
I
life.
wouldn't. I don't know. I don't have kids myself, so you're the expert.
I have a hard time about calling them tweens because I mean, developmentally, he's still a child, but he has the body of a teenager now. So he's 11 and you know, all of my kids have gone through development early, and it's just
It
kind of funny sometimes just to think about it while he's sitting there like playing Legos. It's
it
adorable.
sounds like they keep you young, like
Oh
it
my
keeps you
God.
hip to what's going on with this younger generation these days.
I hope so. I don't ever want to be that generation of like, oh my God, turn the music down.
Yeah,
I don't want to be
exactly,
like that.
exactly. So, at what age did you realize about your childhood trauma? Was this something that came later in life? Is this something fairly recent? Was it a sudden experience, a gradual? Just talk about that, if you would.
Um, it actually was very sudden, and haven't really told my story to a ton of people, but I work in healthcare. I'm a frontline healthcare worker, and COVID changed my entire life, which I'm sure it
Wow.
changed a lot of other people, but I really can't speak to that because I'm not other people. I work in a huge healthcare facility, and my world changed overnight. And so everything had to change. And with that, like my day to day, like my childcare situation changed. But for about 18 months, like nothing really changed with the relationship that I had with my parents, except for they are kind of alternative hippie humans. They refuse to get vaccinated. Like neither one of them have had any vaccinations since
I
childhood.
see. Right.
And it was really, really dangerous for me to be around them because I work with this population that can't mask, and I work with a lot of really fragile children and that can't mask. I have
Right.
to be extremely careful at baseline.
And you have to have
And
boundaries. You have to have boundaries
oh
that
my
need to
God,
be
I have to have
respected.
boundaries.
And
So,
would it be fair to say this was a boundary thing with your parents, perhaps, that led to this
yes,
bigger
but they
rift, this
respected it.
realization?
They respected it because said under any certain terms, you may not you cannot come within like, you know, 6 feet of me, no hugs, no kisses, no nothing. Like you can't see the kids. You can't come over. I can't come over. Like we
And
talk multiple times a day, but not any physical contact because I was terrified I was going to kill them.
did this
I've
come
watched,
to a head then at some point that you mentioned it happened kind of suddenly? Was there a sudden
nope.
point?
Not for that reason. It just that's the kind of the change is maybe the important like setting of the stage maybe, where like just that the whole world changed. So my parents are responsible for childcare for us, and my husband was sent home because of my work, and he remained home for almost 3 years. And so we didn't have to worry about childcare, which was great. But then he went back to work, and I needed childcare again because the kids were, this is 3 years ago, so they still they could be by themselves a little bit, but not for any length of time because they'd burn the house down and
Right. So at some point then this became sort of a realization like at some point previous you didn't realize about childhood trauma and this sort of opened some doors for you then this COVID
well,
experience.
no, not really. I've always had I don't know what to call it. I really feel like I should give it a name at this point. It's not shame because I don't shame myself, but it's something of that nature. It's something like have you ever seen the show Dexter? It's my dark passenger. Like it's my like thing that lives within me that if anybody was to see me on paper
Right.
and then know this about me, the things that happened to me and the things that have gone on in my life, they would be shooketh.
What would be some
Like
things from your childhood, for example, that back then seemed normal and now if you look back on it you would say maybe that's not a sign of a normal family, maybe that's dysfunctional.
how much time do you have? I
Uh
have, I'm
well,
just
give us
kidding.
one example then.
Um, my parents were allowed to veil themselves and allowed to be monsters in plain sight. My entire family is aware of who they are and what they're capable of, and no one said a peep. All of their friends had access to me. Many, many, many bad things happened to me that I'm not ready to like put words to yet. Um, that I openly said with real words as soon as I had words for them, and I was absolutely just shut down. I've brought these significant things up because I do have conscious memory after about 8 or 9. And excuse me, I have said these to the people that I know witness these things, and they absolutely refute them and say, how that's just your parents. That's ridiculous. There's no way. And I'm like, you were there, you saw it happen, you did nothing to stop it. And like, I remember you talking about it. Um,
I
but
can hear
things
you
like,
raising your voice. Would you say that
yeah,
you're getting angry? Would you say there's a lot of anger still?
there's a lot of anger still
And,
because that's what made me realize, I think,
and that's fine,
that
by the way. I just want to say that's
no, it's
fine. A
fine.
lot of people have this attitude, oh, you
Sure.
have to forgive. And I don't agree with that.
No,
I think it's all valid,
absolutely
and
not.
there's nothing wrong, I think, at all with being angry or resentful. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, but just because I think two things came to a head that made me realize that it blew the lid right off and it changed my life. I had a nervous breakdown. I had to go to therapy. This is about 18 months ago, where my mom was babysitting the kids again, and my
Because of
son,
COVID, right? Because of COVID. So the
yeah,
COVID is tied in
hmm
here, right?
yep, and one day a week for 5 hours in the afternoon, in my home, the same place that she's always been, no big deal. My dog had cancer. We had to put him down, and that's when
I'm sorry.
things changed. Thank you. My son came to me at the time he was like 13, and I've always been a very open person because of my past, and said, I always use the real words for body parts. I always say like, if there's no secrets, you have to come tell me immediately. And my son disclosed to me just unbelievable accounts of verbal abuse from my mother to him. And I stopped and I went deer in the headlights, and I needed to take a minute, and I couldn't parent from that point. It just brought me to my knees. And then my husband and I started to just ask basic questions. We didn't want to spook him
Was
or
it
anything
making
like
you
that.
think of your childhood, the things that you were hearing? That
150, because I haven't thought about these things in, I'm 44 now, so
yeah,
how many
there it
years
is.
ago?
There it is.
Yep.
There's that connection, that
hmm
realization. Yep.
Yep. And then he described what could have been taken from like a screenplay from the same age for him, and with the things that she was saying, the words she was using, the phrases, because he's a very
Right.
smart kid, and he's
Let me ask
he
you this:
knows.
what do you think about
hmm
her mother? Did you know your grandmother? Do you know
I did. I did.
how things were for your mother coming up? Was that the cycle there?
I don't think it was, to be honest with you, because I knew my grandmother pretty well and I knew my grandfather pretty well. And I'm obsessed with genealogy. Have been since I was a teenager because it was just something nerdy to do. And there is so much, if you know about anything about epigenetics in terms of like passed down generational trauma, um, in terms of how that can affect later generations, specifically along the female line. There's a pretty significant mental health history on her side of the family from both her mother and her father. And my entire life, like this just came up for me a couple weeks ago. My entire life, I was told how much my grandfather just hated my mother. Oh my God, he was such a jerk. Oh, what a turd, and just on and on and on. But this man was kind and gentle with the rest of his daughters
Right.
and all these female relatives that I have around me that I've heard like, like superfluous things from here and there. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. I do most of my thinking in the shower because it's the only private place I have, for God's
Nothing
sake.
wrong with that. I'm with you.
Right. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, what if this was the fact that she, because she always said, like, I have no idea why he was so mean to just me. And I'm like, I wonder if, thinking about that she was just miserable, she is a miserable person
Right.
for the
Right.
most part.
Right. Yeah, and
If
you
she's
still
not getting
find those
her,
things, still finding those discoveries in the
yeah,
aftermath of the big one. I myself still all the time find these things. In fact, which dovetails nicely into that up note that I'd mentioned previously. We like to close on an up note, something positive, and it sounds like you're actually kind of moving that way. So since you've had this realization, since you've come to this understanding and you're finding out these things, understanding better, what are a couple positive things about that you're taking from your recovery?
It's helped my marriage a lot. My husband has
That's
always
great.
walked his road alone with the fact that he comes from, if 10 times more significantly traumatic family than I do. And we cut ties with them very early on in our marriage. And it really helped me see things from his point of view because he's just a very quiet person. We complement each other very well. And I've now can see things from his perspective, why he's made certain decisions. It's strengthened our marriage because
Oh,
he
I love to
got
hear
to
this.
step
This is
in.
great.
Yeah. He's a good egg. We've been together for a really long time since we were kids. And that's a story for another show, my friend.
Yes, yes, yes. And definitely there will be more stories. We'd love to have you back. Tina, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us today. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. If you've taken anything away from this podcast, please support the show by sharing it with your friends. The You Deserve Better podcast has a Facebook group. Would love to see you there. And by all means, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you'd like to be on the show, drop us a line at udbpodcastrules@gmail. That was my second choice for a name, but I think it's all right. udbpodcastrules@gmail. I am the other son. Let them burn their eyes on me.